Hello, Jeff Zwerink again with Give and Take, the segment of our show where we look at interesting scientific topics and help use those to equip you to be more confident in sharing the gospel. Today I'm joined again by my friend and colleague Anjeanette Roberts, and we're going to ask the question, are viruses alive? AJ, it's good to have you here again today.
Thanks, Jeff. Good to be here.
So this is something that seems like a silly question because viruses obviously cause diseases. How could they not be alive? But what is it that is driving people to ask this question? Are viruses alive?
Well, actually, it's not a silly question.
Okay,
it's a question
that's good to know.
It's a question that some grad students probably even get on like qualifying exams because it's somewhat contentious. But I would say definitely not. Viruses are not alive. I come down pretty strongly on that side.
Okay, well, I'm glad to know my question wasn't a silly one then. But obviously, viruses don't meet these criteria at some level. So in what ways do viruses fall short of being classified as alive?
Viruses need the cell's machinery.
Okay.
They need the cell's resources, and they need the cell's energy in order for more viruses to be made.
So that's really kind of fascinating that, you've got this genetic material in viruses, if you will. So they've got some components of life, but is it just really because without a host, viruses don't do anything? Is that why they're not considered life?
I think that's probably a fair comment, absolutely. So viruses carry their own blueprints for their own reproduction, and some of them, like the giant viruses, actually carry some of the machinery with them, but they still require additional machinery, resources, and energy that come only from living cells.
Okay, so why is it, I know you, in your article, we'll kind of reference a little bit later, there's an article you wrote where you point out that people are wanting to redefine life to include viruses. Why would we be wanting to do that?
Well, I think to give them the benefit of the doubt, to think the best of why they want to do that, I think for some researchers, they just want to justify that their research is important.
Okay.
And if you can say that you're researching something that pertains to life, then we all sort of value that a little more highly.
Okay.
So that might be one motivation.
Well, as somebody who studies stars and gamma rays, I take a little offense at that because nothing I observe is life. But okay,
Well, but we're all stardust. No,
okay.
never, sorry.
No,
sorry.
Okay. No, that's distracting. Go ahead there. Okay, so there is some of that of just making their research more engaging, if you will.
Right. Now, if I wanted to be a little bit more skeptical or give them a little bit more of a nefarious characteristic as to why they might want to redefine life, it would be because of the desire to tell a naturalistic story that basically doesn't involve God in the process of living organisms. And so if you can redefine giant viruses that are fairly complex and have components like immune systems or translational machinery, not just for making their own proteins once they're in a cell, if you can define that as life, then it's not much further to say, well, these don't replicate on their own. Much simpler viruses that only have 5 genes instead of 1,200 or 1,400 genes, then they ought to be considered life too. Well, if they're considered life too, then a molecule, a simple RNA molecule that self-replicates, is at least accomplishing something that viruses don't, and so that ought to be life too. And so if we could sort of push what life is all the way back to the most simplistic self-replicating molecule, then maybe we might be tempted to endow them with other characteristics of life, like volition, sort of guiding their own direction or their purpose. And now we're starting to sneak teleology into what I would consider inanimate, non-living entities in order to sort of account for life's presence and complexity.
So if I've heard what you said, there's kind of 2 aspects of that, or that stand out to my mind, is that one, we see this teleology and purpose to things, and so we're trying to endow that on things that clearly aren't purposeful and teleological and kind of blurring that distinction, if you will.
I think that's right.
And then there seems to also be another aspect of the origin of life is quite a complex scientific problem, maybe unsolvable, and if we keep defining life less and less lifelike things, that it makes that jump not so large and it seems like we solve things.
Right. If we can define life as a self-replicating RNA molecule, which is a whole lot less complex than probably even a simple virus, and that's a whole lot less complex than a giant virus. And all of those things I would say are not living or not life. But if we can redefine life to that, then we've crossed significant boundaries that seem to remain and grow more significant to the origins of life.
So let's kind of look at that from an apologist or an evangelist perspective. If we now want to engage in a discussion, somebody's come along and saying, "Oh, viruses are life. Life's easy. We can solve that." You know, we're kind of blurring some of these distinctions. How do we bring those distinctions out so that we can articulate just how complex or how remarkable life is, and get to kind of some of the teleological and purposeful discussions that flow out of that?
You know, what are the characteristics that you think are entailed by life? I would ask the person that I'm engaged with that question. And if they think it's just an ability to sort of reproduce, then a copy machine might be considered alive, because it sort of reproduces paper, right? And so I would really push the direction sort of in a philosophical direction and say, is that really life?
Okay.
You know, do you really find that a satisfying answer? You know, because it's one thing to ask the question and just go through sort of intellectual type processes of examining, should this be life, shouldn't this be life? And we leave out our intuition, we leave out our human experience. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we do that. And I think that anytime we can bring the conversation back to, do you really believe that? And do you find that a satisfying answer? That often you'll find they don't really believe it. They don't really find it a satisfying answer.
Thanks for your comments, AJ. I appreciate them.
You bet.
You know, there are those who will try and blur the line and make life seem not really that interesting or significant. But when we get right down to it, life is incredibly unique. And how life got here on Earth is a fascinating topic, and it provides great evidence for there being a creator. You know, I'd encourage you to go check out our YouTube channel. Go to Reasons to Believe's YouTube channel. Look for episode 53 of 2819 and look at the Give and Take episode there, and you will get some more ideas of how to use the fascinating uniqueness of life to share the gospel with those God's put in your life. So go check it out.